Listeners, you are in for such a special conversation today here at the GoodHard Story Podcast. We are talking about sadness, sacred sadness, and what a joy to even talk about this. I feel so healthy and seen even discussing sadness right here in Atlanta, Georgia, as a sweet Christian girl. It feels very freeing, I must say, to have a conversation about sadness. And who better than someone who has written prolifically about it, talked about it, and moved me deeply in all the realms of holy, sacred sadness than Scott Erickson. Scott Erickson is here.
Woo!
Hey. Scott is, many amazing things. He is a painter, a writer, really a visual artist, theologian, all the things. And he's a deep well. Listen, I wanted to start by just telling you, probably of all the insights I've gleaned from all your work and talking about sadness and sorrow, I was the pinnacle story that strikes me is, of course, when you met the character of sadness at Disneyland, and sort of the beautiful way you talk about feeling so just shook by meeting sadness at the happiest place on earth. And it's just such a beautiful picture of, I don't want to spoil it. Why don't you tell our listeners?
Yeah, let me tell that story, because it was very unexpected, as most, if not all, I guess, quote unquote, mystical moments are. I was just with my family. It was, oh my gosh, my in-laws like to go for like 3 or 4 days. So I think it was like day 3. So we're in it.
So intense.
Yeah, we're in Disneyland Park in California. We're in California Adventure, and we're walking by, like, everybody's going to the big roller coaster, and and there was the character Joy from the movie Inside Out. We stop and get some photos, and I talk to the worker, and I'm like, I like Joy, but Sadness, the other character, and because I had a little pin on it, I was like, Sadness is my girl. And she goes, oh, well, Sadness will be here in 10 minutes. And I was like, great, we're coming back. So we drop all the adventurers, the big kids, off at the roller coaster, and my mother-in-law, my youngest, and my daughter come back with me. And when we come back to the line, the line is like, it zigzags, and it's like five lines deep. And I had this experience where, in the Celtic tradition, there's this idea of the thin space. I don't know how to describe it, except for like, it's almost like this veil descended upon us as we were in line. And I just remember saying out loud, like, something's happening. What's happening? And I just was very aware of everything going on around me. And I looked around, and I looked up to Sadness, the people who were meeting this character. Yeah. And first of all, I gotta say, like, these characters, Sadness isn't like, hey, nice to see you. I mean, Sadness is an emotion. Right. So she always has to be sad. And the people whoever's in this costume is doing great.
I remember you wrote about that, maybe in your Substack, that, like, props to the actress. She's amazing too. Yeah. She's in it.
Yeah. They're always crying and kind of sad, just sad. And I look up, and there is, a boy in a wheelchair, very limited in his mobility and stuff. And his parents are kind of talking to the workers, but he has his hand out, and like Sadness is holding his hand, and they're just like having a moment together. I don't know if he was saying or anything, but there's just this like, it was so weird. Like, his parents were to the side, and it's just like him and Sadness sitting together. And then they move on, and then this like middle-aged woman, I'm middle-aged, there's no judgment here. It was just like this woman around my age, all by herself, gives Sadness like too long of a hug, and then they take a photo together. And then next was these like teenagers who got like a picture and had Sadness write her autograph. And I just watched like person after person after person have this moment with, you know, a character and emotion, which is kind of countercultural to Disneyland.
Right.
I mean,
Of course it
Disneyland,
is.
the whole Disney experience is very joyful and exciting, and it's run on adrenaline and sugar. And yet here's this character who's like, I want you to slow down. I want you to feel. I want you to, it's okay to, what is a famous sadness line? Like, crying helps me come in touch with like the despair in the world, something like that.
At the happiest place in the world.
And the happiest place on earth. And when I got there, we took a picture together, but I was like, but to my mother-in-law, I was like, take Jones, I want a picture with sadness by myself. It's so funny that I'm sitting here because I actually have the Polaroid right here.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Oh wow.
And I took a picture with sadness, and it in reflecting upon it, it just was like, you know, it's like meeting a stranger you've known your whole life. It's like a paradox. It's like something that's always been there, but we've kind of ignored. And I am an Enneagram 4. I'm a melancholic. I do have a lot of energy, and I'm very excited, but I feel a lot. And so sadness is like a really familiar feeling every day. And to have it embodied, and this is just good art and good theater and good therapy, to embody this presence, it was so cathartic. And to hug it and to be grateful for it because of what the dynamic and the contextual, the layeredness it gives to my life. I just found myself really grateful for that moment. And it was like the only way I know how to describe it was just like a really holy moment.
It was holy moment.
It was a really holy moment.
Absolutely. You know, I could not be more opposite of you in that way. We have a lot of similarities. We're spicy. I love it. However, I think I'm an Enneagram 3, although some say that, no, you're a 7. You're clearly 7. So I don't know. Either one, I'm super people-pleasing, super the opposite of melancholy, very positive, just naturally, very like, also just want everybody to be happy and to like me and be happy. And so gross. Still unpacking how my faith has intersected these tendencies and how much that's messed me up. And what's so interesting to me, Scott, is like, as a just person who really wants to walk with the Lord and feel my emotions in such a healthy way, it's been so complex to see how compartmentalized I can be, and how truly the man of sorrows, Jesus, would be like, I want to spend my life practicing the way of Jesus, and yet I don't want to touch sorrow or sadness. Get it away, get it out. It can't be a part of my worldview. Like, I want to be happy and bring joy only. And the whole notion of like, I can live with a low-grade sorrow in life and still feel joy, and there's a tension that I carry, is like something that I didn't really wake up to until after my stroke, honestly. Like, that they could coexist, that sadness and joy coexist. And you probably understand that very well. And I'm jealous.
Well, I think you're bringing up some really good points, which is the way I take it is, there is a part of at least the American tradition of Christianity that I was brought up into, that felt very uncomfortable with being sad, as if it was like just messing up the product pitch. Hey, you have Jesus, you should always be joyful. But you know, what's great about Inside Out, and what was great about and some other research and learning that I've done, and like, you know, this is a core emotion. It's not something that we're supposed to get rid of. It's something that God made us with. And so to only activate and only participate and only really recommend one types of emotions alongside your spirituality is very limited. And when I discovered that Isaiah passage where it says the Jesus is the man of sorrows, the man acquainted with grief, it was really tremendous and freeing to go, oh, and in fact, I like to say that, and I know you feel the same too, is that I've, my faith has changed a lot. It's after you lose a few friends to different diseases and suicide and stuff, really takes a toll on you. And I remember, sometimes I'm like, I am a Christian because of the resurrection, but I'm also a Christian because of the shortest verse in the Bible, which is Jesus wept. Because if there was a story of God incarnating on our world and he never ended up at crying at a friend's funeral like we all have, then I wouldn't believe it, because it would just mean he was insulated from the pain of being alive. And the fact that it is in there means it means a lot to me, that it was like, and I'm not, there's a certain part where I can't explain it. It's a mystery that's unexplainable, but like what we know about God is, in answering all of our questions about why do we suffer, why is life this way, the answer we get is participation. And I don't know if we know all the answers. It's just, this is what life is. And yet the divine is participating in it. And so what does it mean to be alongside us, with us in all of that? And then there's a lot of questions and responses that come from that, which you have helped me, and you and Jay, and just the writings you have done and the work. I think your voice is so important. I almost see it as like a stone in a river of BS.
Well, likewise, Scott. I very drawn to how you are not one note, and how you are not trying to be a salesman for Jesus. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I love that. I love people who are willing to enter into tension and not have answers. I just think our world needs so desperately people who are asking complex questions and not arriving with certainty at much of anything.
I mean, don't you feel? Thank you. I mean, partly I'm not employed by any institution, so there's no. I'm really just, what do you think about it? But I was like, I'm very aware that how ridiculous it feels at times to believe in some mystical man hiding out behind everything. But what happens is that I keep bumping into him, or I keep bumping into people who tell me their mystical stories. I mean, I think I feel similar to a lot of people where, the institution, the organization that I grew up in gave me a lot of beautiful and wonderful things, but has also proven over the years to harbor a lot of very evil and corrupted people. And there's a general heartbreak at the revealing of all of that. But people keep telling me their mystical stories. I was just in Florida with this couple, or this church and this couple, and I was out for dinner and we were talking about this, and this woman was like, oh, I was just in Indonesia. We were talking about just how life is so weird and magical at times. She goes, I was just in Indonesia and I was talking with this woman who's like our age and her elderly mom, and this woman was like, oh yeah, my mom sees like the spirit world. And the mother was like, I don't want to talk about it, but eventually she would, and she did, and they talked about it. And this Lauren, she goes, hey, have you ever seen Jesus? And she goes, oh yeah, I bump into him all the time.
Oh my goodness, love it.
I think that story, it's humbling. I think that's it. It's like the thing that you think you have a hold on is nothing you have a hold on, but it's also, it's very intimate, and it's very sincere, and it's not distant. It's very, very close. And I think a practice of spirituality is not getting God's attention. It's awakening to where God is already speaking in your life. And when I am aware and I'm practicing, and I'm taking the time to slow down and listen, I'm just overcome with the detailedness and intimacy of it all. So that's
Yeah.
so
What a great.
I don't have to pitch it at all, because I'm not like, you have to buy my product. I'm like, oh, it's already in there in you. I just, could we talk about why you're not listening at all?
Why you're not listening.
And that's been a big change for me over the, I'm trained as a spiritual director, and spiritual direction is really about being alongside what is already happening, not trying to create an experience, but just going, how do we uncover what's already there? And to just have to be aware of where God already is such a delight. I've been freed from the control of trying to make something happen.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, but and I know, participating with Hope Heals Camp, there is a real work of facilitating a space that can get through all the noise and busyness of modern living,
right?
And and through the shows that I've tried to create and the art and books, is trying to become, I like to call it an excavation tool, trying to get to the thing that's already in there but got covered up.
Oh wow, that's good.
With all of life and stuff. So yeah.
Well, you do it beautifully, Scott. Listen, resurrection is a major theme throughout your work, and as you know, I love resurrection. You are so gifted at honoring the sadness in life while acknowledging the hope there, that the death of something might lead to resurrection and rebirth. What deaths in your life are opening up space for resurrection? And practically, what has that looked like? Too much? Too early? Too much?
No, it's great. Let's get into it. So I just finished my 5th book, which is with my friend Justin McRoberts. It's a prayer book for the season of depression. Okay. It's like a spiritual companion. It doesn't come out till next year, so this isn't a book promotion podcast. But unbeknownst in that process, that my wife Holly, in early June, had a couple really big panic attacks and went through this season of deep anxiety to where she was bedridden a lot. And I had, then some kids are off of school for summer, trying to finish the book. All of a sudden I'm in charge of the household and kids' schedules. And it was a lot. And it puts you in the paradox of marriage, which is just like, I really believe that every human life, eventually the thing that's deep down in there is like, I'm going to come out whether you like it or not, and you're going to have to deal with it. And I'm totally supportive of that. And then on the other side, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst timing for you to lose your like ability to help out. And it was really hard. And she's much better. Therapy, doctors, new medication, she's doing great. And in a weird way, always there's this moment on the other side of hard stuff that you're like, I'm kind of glad that happened, because it's got me in touch with something.
That's right. That's right.
I was recently with some people, and I would love you to respond to this, but the teacher was like, they're like, hope isn't believing like everything's going to work out. Hope is believing that there are some ways of living that are worth doing, and you're going to do that no matter how things turn out. And that felt really true. Like, I've been looking for that definition for a while, of just like, it's not about will this turn out or not. It's like, this is the way to live in the world. Exactly. This is the way that I want.
Okay, totally. I have a lot to say about that. And what I've come to in my journey of beginning to understand and process what is real hope. And I think as a child and my life before the stroke, probably, I would have seen something like Romans 5:3, that suffering ultimately leads to hope, and hope will not put us to shame. And very much like, I will hope and I will get the hope, and then yay, I've got it. And now I recognize that hope is a cycle. And if you read that verse, it's saying that suffering leads to perseverance, to character, to hope. And the whole point is that then you are not put to shame and can go back in to the suffering with a renewed hope. Hope is a living force, I believe, that propels us into the ongoing hurt of life, but with an ongoing hope. So we're like strengthened and fortified in our hard stories. So it's not like you get it and you've got awesome hope, but it's like you're built different after each time.
You know, I think there's just like a lot of things we need to take time to define a lot of things. Because I think when you say like the sadness of life or I think, what are those things? For me, I think we were just really frustrated that we're so fragile.
Yeah.
You know? And that doesn't help in a culture that's obsessed with comic books and movies right now, which just shows like, these super women and men, they get thrown and they bust a brick wall. I mean, I nick my elbow on a table and I'm done for the day.
Excuse me. Yeah.
We get tired and, I had a moment last week where I was driving and I probably got the shame cycle of comparison on social media, but immediately like this wave of depression hit me, so much so I was like, I need to go home and lay down for a while. Like, I don't fight it, just this isn't good. Like there are things that just take us out and we can be mad that we're not so strong in those moments, but really that is the stuff that connects us, is those vulnerabilities, our limitations, our weakness. And that is where, in our faith practice, that's where God meets us too. And so I heard, and I'm still mulling over this, but our friend Father Richard Rohr just offhandedly said this, that, he's like the only solution to, the only cure for dualism, even the dualism between action and contemplation, which is the name of their place, is forgiving reality for it not being what you hoped it was.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
I have been mulling over what that would look like, what that looks like. And I think because there's a turn on that, which is reality going, yeah, and you're not what you hoped you thought you'd be either. Like we could sit with each other and the dissolving of ideals and the acceptance of reality. But it's what you were alluding to, is just like, if we get back to sadness is a really helpful function to cry and grieve. And then even biologically, our body releases all of these endorphins and these things, and we feel joy on the other side. Gratitude isn't really known until you know that you can lose things.
Yeah.
There is this symbiotic relationship between like loss and having, seeing and seeing things disappear. And I'm much more wanting to be in tune with those things in my life as well, accepting them as like part of this whole journey.
Oh, absolutely. You and I both preach how deeply purposeful our pain can be, but we also acknowledge that not everything happens for a reason, so perfectly tied up in a neat little bow. And some things are just hard and have no easy resolution. You wrote it so beautifully that not every day is a day to alchemize our pain. That just hits deep. So my question is, how do you approach those terrible days and seasons that can't be made into something beautiful or meaningful in the moment? And while you think, I will add to this question that for me, it's been extremely difficult to not want to platitude it up, to instantly assign some toxic positivity to everything. And it's really difficult. I don't think it is for you. That's why I'm asking you. It seems to come more natural.
I don't share all the sad moments online.
Yes, I love it. I'm here for it. I'm asking you.
I have been working on like an image set that is specifically for like depression or when you're just like, I can't handle it. And one of my favorite images is just like the tides of the ocean. I grew up by the ocean, up in northern Washington on the Puget Sound. And, you know, if you were to sit, and I've only done this a few times, but if you were to sit for, you know, 6-7 hours, you would notice that the water would go out and then it would eventually come back, and that there is this tide, there's this flow. And we live in such a fast society and culture and technology, but our lives do change that same way. Like nothing is ever going to stay the same. It's always in a change. It's very slow and it takes time to look at it. So I just, on the days that I don't feel like I have what it takes, I just try to give myself grace and going, it will change. So today it's okay if you need to like lay in bed or watch a movie or, you know, or like eat a plate of nachos or whatever, you know, whatever feels like love manifesting itself. And I am a big believer in the power of waking up to another day. And so, yeah, that's like one image. There's a great image by, I think it's by Manet, Edward Manet, of the ship that is in a harbor and, but the tide has gone out. And so it's sunk in the mud and people are walking around it. And then it's great because it says like, hey, this ship, these plans, this voyage, it seems halted, but it's just because the tide went out. But if you're to come back in 12 hours, that ship's going to be ready to go and sailing out of the harbor. And life, you know, now in my late 40s is just like, yeah, I've become accustomed to the rhythms that like, sometimes you feel like you're stuck in the mud,
right. But it's not
the tide is eventually going to come back. And my wife and I have a mantra, which is a phone call and an email can change everything, because we're both self-employed people. And sometimes you're just like, oh, there's no plan, but it's like so many times somebody has called or emailed and then you're like, oh, all of a sudden everything's different. So if I'm trying to hold on to that, like everything can be different, I just can't see that in this moment, but trusting that. And I think I wrote this in Honest Advent, which is one of the messages was like, when you pray, when you whisper by yourself, please God, do something with my life, you don't know the unseen gears and switches and things that begin to go into play that eventually, you know, months, years later come up and that prayer is being answered, you know, like so we should keep getting into our heart space and asking those questions, those desires, those prayers that are in there.
For sure. For me, I spend a lot of time, I feel like these days, talking to people in the worst moment of their lives or in the worst, you know, season they've ever been in. I mean, definitely some people within the Hope Heals community or just the disability space in general are dealing with lifelong stuff.
Yeah.
But many, for instance, yesterday, typically able-bodied 23-year-old guy, loose window broke and he fell out and now is paraplegic. And I was in his hospital room for several hours yesterday. And you can't, well, I guess some people tragically do. And I think that I saw that in my own story. People can try to slap a Bible verse on it and not really just get in there and let it be both. And I feel like one of the things I'm called to do actually is introduce this idea that like we don't have to go to that toxic positivity, that empty positivity, but we can live in the pain, but know the ocean, the tide will come in and come out. That beautiful truth of 1 Peter 5:10 that after you've suffered a little while, that the God of all grace will strengthen, whatever that verse says, I forgot the end, but that there is like this just holy waiting space, that not everything is one note, I guess. And I've been very struck in your work by that. And the fact that you are so just open that you may never live not depressed again. And I mean, it's crazy to say that's so hopeful, but it is. That feels so hopeful and so real. I guess it feels so hopeful to me because I'm like, something about knowing that and speaking it is a part of befriending the reality, which probably is a profound thought for all of our lives, is how do we befriend what is in our stories.
We're pitched this thing like hell is where God is not. Let's really think it through. Where can God not be? And I'm not even, and I don't want to talk about a place or whatever. I'm talking about what has happened to you. If what we're saying is there's a place that God cannot be, then we're saying that there's a secret part of us that says, in my suffering, maybe God is not here. And we know that that's not true. You attest to that's not true. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I mean, and then the psalmist says, if I make my bed in hell, you are there with me. There is no place in our human experience that God cannot be. You want to talk about what resurrection is? Resurrection is, I haven't said, the grace of God allowing you to be taken apart and your illusions to die so you can receive a deeper perspective and view of what this all is. And is to see a vision that seems inconceivable to be accomplished, and yet you caught a glimpse of it. God gave you a glimpse of it, and you find yourself back in your life going, I can't go back to who I was. That person's dead, and I don't know how to go into that, but at least I've been given a place to walk to. And I believe resurrection is happening in our midst. I don't think a friend of mine said, like, it makes, if death and resurrection is the cycle we're always going to be in, it makes sense that it takes our ultimate death to enter into our ultimate resurrection. But until then, we're going to apprentice this cycle in our lives. And I think, why do we suffer? I don't know. It's just a part of what is. But I'm not being asked to do anything that Jesus hasn't participated in. And I'm not being asked to, and you know these stories, we hear these stories that seem so anti, like, rhetoric, which is just like, the closest I ever was to God was in my worst loss or my worst suffering. Like, that is, there's volumes of that. So the presence of God, what we do know about God is like, that we'll never have to do these things alone. That there is no place that we can escape God's presence. And I think that is maybe an insecurity or a secret conversation that's hard to have, which is just like, is there something that I can go through that I will eventually be out of God's presence? And I want to attest to no. Yeah. But it still sucks.
Yeah, it's both. Absolutely. No, and yeah, it's still terrible. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just went through my son's 6th eye surgery.
Yeah. Will you share a bit about what your son is walking through?
Yeah, well, and I think we talked about this, but like my oldest son, so through my wife's family, there's a genetic disease called juvenile retinoschisis, and it causes fissures in your retina. It leads to diminished eyesight. It can lead to blindness, but you just really don't see very well. And my oldest son has it. We found out last summer, my younger son has it too. So we'll begin that journey with him. It already has, but my oldest son a few years ago had a retina detachment. It means he lost vision in one of his eyes. And 3 consecutive summers, he's gone through pretty extensive surgeries to restore that vision, which has been restored, but he no longer has a lens in his right eye. And he'll probably have to have some kind of external lens stuff. But but he's a 13-year-old eighth grader.
Right.
So he's into all of the,
Yeah,
it's
so hard.
he's not just walking around sad all the time. He doesn't know anything different. He's just gone through some really hard things. So I'm like, I don't know who you're going to become in the community, but who's to say that the person who doesn't see all that great sees better than anybody else?
Wow.
About what things really are. So it has, I think as a parent, one of the main qualifiers of a parent, whether you read a lot of books or you're good, I think one of the main qualifiers is you would do anything you possibly could to alleviate any hardship out of your children's lives. And, I think that I've definitely said, if I could trade places with you, I would take your pain. And, but I had to think through that and go, well, what would I have to do with it? I would probably go through the stages of grief. Like I'd be mad about it. I'd be angry. And then finally I would have to accept it and go, what am I going to do with my life now? And he has to do the same thing. And I don't want to I can't take that away from him. I can just be alongside it with him. Which is I feel is a very Christ story. Like, I'm not going to take it away, but I'm going to go through it as well. It's not beyond me to see the irony that as a professional visual artist, I have 2 kids with eye diseases. That feels like a little bit of a cosmic joke that is painful, does. But it is so painful. But what has it led to? I've entered into a large community of parents who have kids who are going through something. It has opened a real vulnerable place of connection and sympathy to like everybody's going through something difficult. I don't know if I know all the things, but that's like one aspect of our lives. So
of course I think about that so much with your story is you are a visual theologian, and now you're just such a brilliant artist, and you have 2 children with this eye stuff. It does feel like a cosmic joke. I will tell you that I have what is called by me an SOS club, and if you lived here, I'd invite you to join. Basically, we are a group of women, so you'd be an outlier, that just
I love hanging out with them.
It's pretty great. Who sit in our hard, sad stories and don't try to fix it.
Can we franchise to like a West Coast? I'll host that one.
Definitely can. Feel free to.
I immediately want to start the branding.
The SOS, and it has just ministered so deeply to not put a bow on it, to not make it okay, but to listen with deep, real empathy and allow the empathetic listener in the room, which we all commit to be, to receive our story again and again and again, and to feel known by the telling and receiving of the story, and to let the empathetic listener be a part of making us feel known, because so much of what we feel in our stories is shame. That so complicated, but we feel somehow like we can't let people know how bad it is or how sad it is. And maybe you can, Scott.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me, but in this SOS club, it's kind of the point, is we know how bad it is. And I mean, one wonderful dear friend in the group buried her 14-year-old son who had significant disabilities less than a year ago. So another woman's husband left, and it's just rough stuff. And
Yeah.
There's this just holy practice of sitting in it and recognizing that the Holy Spirit's on the move and we don't have to put a bunch of words around it. And it's incredibly healing. So I
Yeah.
would absolutely invite you to the SOS Club, and I would encourage you, which I'm sure you're already doing, to seek out an empathetic listening ear and let that start to do something to your brain, to feel known in the nightmare, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to you briefly about lament. You're obviously really good at it. I'm not. Do you have any rhythms or rituals of expressing grief that have felt particularly cathartic to you?
Catherine, these are really great questions. You should do this for a living. There's so much that's just very hard to articulate, and I think maybe there's a pressure to have the words for everything, and I just don't at times. So I like to walk. I'd like to go on long walks. A friend asked me, if you had 3 hours to do anything you wanted in the world, what would you do right now? And I'd be like, I want to go on a walk. I just want to go on a walk. As a 47-year-old man, I'm like, I just want to go on a walk today. And there's a bit of, for me, lament is an embodied experience. It's not a cerebral explanation. I think the poem or the prayer comes after the physical aspect of it. So there's a bit of like, I just want to move through my pain. I just want to, like, I don't know what to say. I just want to move with it. I also like to just swim laps too. I love the water. So I'll do that. And then probably secondly, I would look to some kind of visual art in some kind of way. You know, if you can think about art this way, every human being has had the question, like, what do we do? What do we do with life? What do we do with our pain? What do we do with all this stuff? And they've left artifacts all throughout time of ways of dealing with this. And we have so many resources now that have gathered those things in books and online and stuff. And so again, I keep a collection of helpful things, of just like things that I can come back to that voiced or gave explanation to what I was feeling.
I recently interviewed Andy Squires on a podcast, and he has a line in a new song of his called Backwards Kingdom, where he writes, if you want to go to war, bring out the tambourines. And I just thought, so good, so beautiful, that notion. And I'm very informed by just beautiful art. You know, I'm reminded of the quote, I don't know what it's from, but you do this, Scott, that take your broken heart and turn it into art. I'm sure you've heard that like a ton. Yeah. And that's clearly what's at work. It sounds dumb and cheesy a bit, and it rhymes. I'm sorry. It doesn't sound like something cool you'd read or say, but I'm
writing it down. Well, no, Catherine, the next like tour or show that I have is this idea. It's kind of this path of the healer, which is you went through something and then you're turning it into something that becomes healing to others. And then I was like, I think there's I'm not trying to say everybody should become an artist, but my art, why people have it on their walls or tattooed on their skin, is because it's all artifacts of like trying to create something out of the experiences I'm going through. And I was like, I think there's a way to distill this and just into some kind of, when this happens, how do we integrate it and transform it? And I'm interested in doing that with others. So yeah, take your broken heart and make it into art is exactly what I've been like thinking about.
Well, thank you for loving that. It's probably way too like not cool and corny, but it's kind of beautiful too. I like to say that what we get to do with our lives is be survival guides for somebody else. That, you know, I think one reason I
Yes.
I write books is that I want my life to be a survival guide that you can give somebody else of how to do it. And
Yeah.
I love that you're writing it down, Scott Erickson down. Scott Erickson's writing down something I'm saying. That's pretty cool.
I'm taking these cosmic gifts, these like pieces I need while I'm putting something together.
Perfect. Good. Because that's the truth. And that's what we get to be for each other. That's what camp is. It's basically a group share of how to be survival guides and live out our stories.
Yeah, my church community this whole summer we're doing a whole thing about how to tell your story, but because I was talking with one of my best friends who's the co-pastor, because I was like, everybody should try to make a one-person show at like, even if it's just for your friends one night, because it's so, I don't think you can really know the story of your life until you take time to try to tell the story of your life.
Of course.
Because you're caught up in so many other stories of what you think your life is. But if you really said, like, how would I say what my life is? And then if you know, I don't want to have a debate on the sacredness of scripture, because I do think it's sacred, but what is it? It's just artifacts of human beings going, what is happening to us? And we took the time to write it down. And that is what becomes the balm for the pain of life, or that's what becomes healing for others, is your story alchemized into what you called it, like a survival guide. That's what so it's worth, I'm reading this Buechner book, Frederick Buechner, called Telling Secrets. And he goes, why I think it's important that I write down my stories, because I don't think my story is better than anybody else's. But if I honestly tell my story, I think you'll find your story in here too. And that will be healing for you. And I think it's the exact same. A lot of times filled with self-doubt of my own story. I'm just like, I don't know, is my life not story worthy? But I believe in the practice of taking whatever that's there and sharing it honestly, because I think it goes to a other human soul, goes, yes, or aha, or that's what I needed to hear. Thanks for articulating that. And it's worth doing.
I'm sure you're very much, I mean, I think he lives in Seattle, but Dan Allender or some of those, Kurt Thompson, some of these voices talking a whole lot about the value of sharing your story, what it does to your brain to just own your story and share your story and the benefits to others than you. So totally, you get it. Listen, I've loved talking to you, but it must come to an end. But I have to ask you at the GoodHard Story Podcast to share in brief what is good in your story, what is hard in your story, and how do you live in that tension in your GoodHard Story, Scott?
What is good in my story is I just practicing gratitude. I'm so grateful for family and friends and the ability to enjoy carnitas. And, like it doesn't have to be big things. I think I had a line in Say Yes, which is like, I'm grateful for how carne asada tastes in my mouth. I know taking joy in those things. A quick laugh and stuff. What's hard is, I think we covered it. It's just kind of under the umbrella of why are things this way, and I wish they could be different. And then what was the last one?
How do you live in the tension of both at the same time?
Okay, I was thinking about this scene. There's a scene in Harry Potter where they're learning these spells and they have to confront a boggart, which embodies your greatest fear. And the way that this teacher is teaching how they face the greatest fear is like make a joke out of it. So if it's like a giant spider, they put roller skates on it. If it's like the Professor Snape, who's very scary, somebody puts their like grandma's bedclothes on him.
Yeah.
It's like take the thing and then make it ridiculous. And I'm a big fan of like personify your greatest fears, make it into a monster, and then like make fun of it. Some kind of like thing, like process like that. So I find a lot of joy in like personifying it, like get it out of your head, make it a character, and then like, joke with it. Like I actually have back here, about being an artist, I made this mug that says, future famous dead artist. because because I think the joke is like when you become great as an artist is after you've
Right.
died, and that's funny. But I made this little like joke mug because the first thing I do is make coffee in the morning, and if I drink this mug and I drink it and I go, I'm on my way, because saying like I'm on my way to something versus I'm never going to be changes to where you're going. So that's kind of how like I like to like confront the scary thing and then try to make a joke out of it.
I
That's
like
my
that a
favorite.
lot, Scott. I do that too.
Yeah.
I'm in my own life, and I think it is the way to live, actually. I start almost every speaking engagement by addressing the elephant in the room, that there is a lady on the stage in a wheelchair, and that could seem really sad and awkward. And it changes
Yeah.
everything. This has been
That's so great.
just so good, so powerful.
Oh,
Thank you for at 6
I love
a.m. Doing this. My goodness. Wow, what a gift.
it is the best way to start the day. I loved it so much.